I'm going to call the May 14, 2025 Williamsburg Planning Commission meeting to order. Ms. Griffin, would you call the roll, please?
Yes, sir. Mr. Hamilton? Mrs. Spo?
Here.
Mr. Tarley?
Here.
Mr. Boswell?
Here.
Mr. Granger?
Here.
Mrs. Liebel?
Here.
And Mr. Phillips.
Here.
Thank you. We have minutes from our most recent meeting, which was March 19th. Does anybody have any edits to the minutes that are posted online? If not, I'll ask, is there a motion to approve the minutes from March 19, 2025 as submitted?
I move that we approve the minutes.
I second.
Mrs. Bo?
Aye.
Mr. Tarley?
Aye.
Mr. Boswell?
Aye.
Mr. Granger?
Aye.
Mrs. Liebel?
Aye.
And Mr. Phillips.
Aye.
Okay, that brings us to our open forum. I'll go ahead and invite anyone in the audience to come and speak to the commission about anything that's not on the, as the single lone person in the audience looks around to see if anybody's coming forward. I don't think anybody is. So I'll go ahead and close the open forum. And that brings us to our public hearings, the first being PCR 25-007. Mr. Lambert?
Yes, good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the Planning Commission. If it's all right, I'll present this matter from my seat. This is what we usually refer to as a cleanup bill. There was a bill passed in the General Assembly that required the city to do some amendments to our environmental protection sections of the city ordinance. So what this PCR 25-007 does is it doesn't change the zoning ordinance except for references. So there are certain sections that, as written, the zoning ordinance references back to in other sections of the city code, and what this will do is just clean up those references based on the edits that were required by the General Assembly.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Mr. Lambert about this?
I just want to confirm that in going through there, there's no substantive change at all. These are simply changes in designation of sections of the ordinance.
That's correct. To the zoning ordinance, there is no substantive change.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for anyone? Okay, I'll go ahead and open the public forum for commentary on this proposal. And seeing nobody rushing toward the podium, I will close it and ask, is there a motion to recommend approval of PCR 25-007?
I so move that we approve PCR 25-007.
Second.
Mrs. Bo?
Aye.
Mr. Tarley?
Aye.
Mr. Boswell?
Aye.
Mr. Granger?
Aye.
Mrs. Liebel?
Aye.
And Mr. Phillips.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. That brings us to PCR 25-008. Ms. Griffin, I believe that's you.
That is me. Good afternoon, Chairman Boswell and members of the Planning Commission. Today I'm presenting to you PCR 25-008. This is a zoning text amendment. We are proposing the text change to 6 business districts. This would include LB2, LB3, B1, B2, B3, and B4. Our request is to require drugstores, grocery stores, or convenience stores without gasoline sales to obtain a special use permit to locate in these districts. Before I move any further, I just wanted to remind you that in the zoning ordinance, you have by right uses. These are uses that are allowed if someone simply comes in and asks for a business license. We confirm the zoning, and if they meet the zoning requirements in the district, and if that use is listed as a use permitted by right, they then receive the applicable permits to be able to open their business. A special use permit, however, is a use that we believe may have adverse or undue impact to other properties or adjacent properties and also other zoning districts. And so we want to take a closer look at those. The Planning Commission can recommend and the City Council can approve specific standards, controls, limitations, and performance criteria and other restrictions on these particular uses. And so what we are looking at is to really close a loophole that we found in an amendment that we had approved in 2022. In 2022, we saw an uptick in violations associated with vape shops. We saw unlawful signage, lighting, the sale of unlawful merchandise, sale to underage customers, various complaints we were receiving from neighborhoods, and we were able to pass vape shops to be required to have a special use permit. And they were required to have a special use permit in those 6 districts that I just named on that front slide. In 2022, we had 5 vape shops. At the time of the request, there were 4 in operation, and 1 had an approved business license that got in right before the change was made. You will see around town now that 2 of those shops have closed. Currently, there are 3 vape shops in operation. And at the time, these were some of the violations that we were seeing. These were the addresses, and the 2 that have closed since that time are 761 Scotland Street and also 1012 Richmond Road. And you might have saw the chief of police come in, and I thought it was a good idea. Well, actually, some of us thought it was a good idea for him, on staff thought it was a good idea for him to be here, to just give you an overview of some of the violations that the police department saw associated with vape shops. I'm going to ask Chief Dunn if he would come up and give a brief discussion.
Good afternoon. Nice to see everyone. And I'm happy just to give a real brief overview, but then to answer any questions you guys might have for us. So to give you a little bit more of a history, we at one time had 5 vape shops in the city. If you know the locations, I'm sure you all do, you know they're pretty close proximity to both the college and then a number of middle schools. Obviously, a lot of concern for us that, all of a sudden it seemed all these vape shops popped up. If you think back at what was going on at that time with our marijuana legislation, it seemed probably pretty likely that retail sale of marijuana was coming. And so it is at least our theory that maybe that was some of the explanation for 5 of them in such a close proximity popping up. As they opened, we had the opportunity to send community members who were assisting us, as well as police officers, to go into these vape shops. And without exception, all vape shops were either A, selling to underage persons, you have to be 21 to buy most of the products, B, selling illegal products, including marijuana, psilocybin, tianeptine, which is a synthetic type drug that's, the alias of that is gas station heroin, and other types of narcotics. The majority of them, maybe all of them, we at some point executed search warrants and recovered actually illegal drugs. The majority of them were also selling prohibited types of items, meaning those items that criminally law enforcement can't really address, but Virginia Department of Agricultural and Consumer Services is able to assist us and to go into these and find these products, which are, again, prohibited, I think is the terminology, but not necessarily something that law enforcement could enforce. And a number of these places were assessed fees and fines as a result of what VDAX found inside of these. So there weren't any that we found that I would say were selling just tobacco type products, or the type of products that we would have certainly thought that they would have been marketing themselves to sell. And they were selling, a lot of these other type of fringe type products that, again, were both prohibited and illegal. Quantities of marijuana and psilocybin, mushrooms, as many of you might know as. We've worked closely with the property owners, and we're down to there are 2 that remain operational, although one of them we executed a search warrant a couple weeks ago, and to my knowledge they have not opened back up since that. I anticipate at some point they probably will open back up, but we are down to 2, and then the other one, the property owner has been working for some time to get them evicted, but these folks don't necessarily want to leave easily, in spite of the property owner going through what I would consider great lengths to try to get them out of his property. So that's just a little bit of a brief recap, but I am certainly happy to answer any questions for you guys.
Chief, thank you for being here today. We appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
From a zoning perspective, if people are going to be running these shops and committing crimes, is there anything? How is zoning going to make an impact on that? I mean, if they go through the process and open it and they're not following the law, is anything that we do in the zoning process going to really help you? I mean, how, and I don't know how familiar you are with this proposal. I don't mean to put you on the spot, but,
Sure.
you know, I mean, if they're going to be, you know, committing these crimes and other offenses, how's zoning going to help with that?
Certainly. Well, I think it's a fair question, a good question. I think that, you know, my understanding and being law enforcement, not zoning, right? So I certainly defer to Tavia as our expert here. But, you know, from my perspective, the folks that are trying to open these shops, I mean, really, I'm gonna say it's been our experience that they want to sell drugs in plain sight, right? I mean, they want to appear legitimate, but they want to sell illegal narcotics inside of their place of business. So I think that just from the perspective of a person that wants to do that, isn't going to want to go through a whole lot of extra steps, isn't going to want to have to bring a whole lot more attention to their operations or who they're working with, or, you know, be outed for whatever sort of shell operation they might have. And so I think, I mean, just having that process in place, I think might make it a little bit easier for us to manage these. Naturally, what we all want is to not have them in the city. And I know my counterparts feel the same way. It isn't just a Williamsburg thing. There is a lot of attention, you know, throughout Hampton Roads and I'm sure beyond on vape shops, because many agencies are getting complaints from community members that typically start with, my 17-year-old son or daughter went to this place and they purchased something. Of course, oftentimes they think that they're purchasing something that's not illegal and that's appropriate for them to purchase. Maybe they don't, maybe they know they're supposed to be 21 to purchase it and they're sort of getting away with that, but for the most part. But then they come home and they utilize this, or they get behind the wheel of a car and they utilize this, and they have an insane, you know, intoxication. Nothing, you know, unlike anything else that they might have otherwise experienced. I mean, it really is a very different level of intoxication. And I think so, and then because of that, you know, I mean, not oftentimes, but occasionally that results in an emergency room visit. You know, in other localities, it's led to even more serious issues because of that. We have been very fortunate here, but we've also worked really hard to try to get in front of it, and so I feel confident that if we make it a bit more difficult for these folks to come to Williamsburg, I think that will help lessen the number that we have in Williamsburg, lessen the number that we have to deal with. That said, that isn't to say that there won't be one, you know, but certainly I think that if there should be one, by the time we've got them in place and by the time we've done our thing, I feel confident that we'll have some additional tools so that we can address it.
Thank you for that. I appreciate it. Other questions for Chief Dunn?
I'm sorry. Were you asking something?
No, I was telling him go ahead.
Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
All right, so I'm not sure whether this is a question for you or Ms. Griffin, but my question is, if the issue is the illegal substances and the law is working that we're prohibiting them and enforcing those laws, and we're talking about requiring a drugstore, perhaps such as Walgreens, or a grocery store, perhaps such as Earth Fare, or a convenience store such as 7-Eleven to get a special use permit, I'm perplexed as to why we're going to make them jump through the hurdle instead of just saying any store that sells vape or something like that, since that's really the target. And I don't know whether that's a question for you or Ms. Griffin.
That is a question for me. He would have, I'll come up.
Yep.
Well, let's ask if there are other questions for Chief Dunn before we play musical podiums.
And I'm also happy to stick around.
Mr. Tarley had some questions. More from
My
Ms.
question is similar to Mr. Granger,
Okay.
so.
Ms. Bowen, questions for the chief?
No,
Similar.
thank you.
Okay. Ms.
I
Phillips?
have the same question.
Legal? Okay. Chief, thank you so much.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Appreciate it. All right, Ms. Griffin, you're back on the hot seat. Or stand.
So that's an excellent question, Mr. Granger, and that gets us to actually the next slide. Like I said, when I had first started, we do have a loophole in this. Recently, we have been solicited by someone who came in and wanted to open up a vape shop in a business that's closed down, a vacant store, convenience store. And we moved forward to tell them that a vape shop was only allowed by special use permit. And they said, okay, I'll open a convenience store. And we then said, well, give us the information for your convenience store. What will you be selling in your convenience store? And of course, on that list was vapes, tobacco. Clearly, the person who came in, their first request was for a vape shop. And so what we see that's happened is that persons are coming in, learning in those zoning districts that they cannot open a vape shop by special use permit, and now they're asking, and instead, give me zoning approval for a convenience store. A convenience store is something that's allowed by right. We went forward and talked to legal and said, okay, what can we request of them? We had them give us a list of what they would be selling. And at that point, there's no percentage that they're giving us of what they are going to sell there. And they said it would be similar to Wawa. We looked, Wawa has about 18 square feet behind their counter of vapes, cigars, and cigarettes and things of that nature. But again, the person's request was for a vape shop. And so, yes, you are correct that there may be some times when when there's a grocery store that wants to come in, they would have to get a special use permit. Hotels have to get special use permits in the city. Restaurants with drive-throughs in several districts have to get special use permits in the city. And so this would not be the only use that would have to get special use permits. But what we believe is that for the safety, protecting the general welfare of residents, of visitors that come to the city, that we need to make sure that we close this loophole so we don't get the type of businesses that the police have had to go out and we know have been problems. So hopefully that answers your questions. I have a few more slides here that give you the maps of where this would take place. And then there's a listed pros and cons, and I'll just go to the pros and cons now. Here, some of the cons: a thorough review of impacts and compatibility to the community, both positive and negative, would come out of a special use permit process. As you know, persons have to come and have insight from the Planning Commission, insight from City Council, have public input, and we believe it will severely decrease the likelihood that incompatible uses are located in the city, and it increases the probability of more compatible sightings of businesses. As Chief Dunn has said, if someone wants to open a vape shop, will they be willing to go through the Planning Commission or the City Council? And even if they did, the public and Planning Commission and City Council will be able to say if they felt that this particular use, like several other uses in the city, if it's compatible with the neighborhood. Cons: yes, there would be an increased timeline for convenience stores, grocery stores wanting to come into the city. That timeline is with the Planning Commission and with the City Council 2 to 3 months. Thinking about that, the question was, well, will these places go to our neighboring jurisdictions to place their business? I would have to look and see if those neighboring jurisdictions have special use permit processes for these convenience stores or grocery stores, but I can say they will not go there because of the pricing of our permits. Our permits are not so much higher that they would feel like that the cost is not so much higher, they would feel like they would need to go there. We believe convenience stores, grocery stores, drugstores, and vape shops would not relocate to other places to avoid this process, especially if they've done their homework and looked at our demographics, looked at our sales. They would choose Williamsburg because they want to be in Williamsburg, and the 2 to 3 month process would not deter them from doing that. We believe it's better for the city and better for business, and that it would give the Planning Commission, the City Council, and residents the opportunity to vet not only vape shops, but even convenience stores and grocery stores that come into the city. And on the onset, we wouldn't have the issues that we've had with this particular business. This business will open because they came in as a convenience store, and what we will then have to do, along with the police, is go out and make sure they're doing exactly what they say they're doing, and what we've found that they probably, over time, may or may not do that. And so it will be a codes we'll have to go out and do inspections, and the police would have to be there often to do that too. So hopefully that answered some of your questions. Happy to answer anything further, and also Mr. Lampert can answer anything from a legal standpoint. And of course, the chief is still here to answer any additional questions that may have arisen.
Okay, other questions for Ms. Griffin?
I just have a comment. I frequently walk on Richmond Road, and the location that is now closed, that was on Richmond Road, I was walking by there when the place was raided, and people were sitting on the ground handcuffed, and that is not a look that I think I want to have in the city of Williamsburg. In addition, with respect to the increased time associated with the special use permit for a major convenience store to locate, or a major grocery store to locate, that's a small proportion of the amount of time that they have to spend planning and getting ARB approval and getting all of the other approvals that are associated with it. So I don't view that as being a particular con. A con of not having the special use permit, in my view, is increased police effort to handle the complaints, to handle the potential violations. And so I can't think of a pro except, gee, I could put up a grocery store and have potentially illegal activity going on, and then the con would be forever after having the increased police activity and cost to the citizens of law enforcement.
Thank you.
I do have a question now. What is the definition of a vape shop? Is it any store that sells any vapes at all?
No, we do have that definition. I think I put it in the staff report, and it's also here. And I'll go
Ms.
back
Griffin,
to-
I have it right here.
Yes, thank you, and I'll put it on the
So
screen.
as amended, the zoning ordinance would read that a vape smoke shop is a retail establishment that sells cigars, tobacco, tobacco products such as, but not limited to, cigars, pipe tobacco, roll-your-own supplies, herbal and wax vaporizers, glassware, and hemp products like CBD and/or e-cigarettes and associated equipment, including, not limited to, vape batteries, coils, and e-liquids.
So I guess my question is really, is the solution being proposed here a little bit of an over regulation to, the drugstores, grocery stores, and convenience stores? Like, I understand that the position is saying, like, well, because you tried to open up as a vape shop, but now you're trying to open up as a convenience store, that's not working. So I think the solution in that situation is, well, we're gonna require you to be classified, I guess, or defined as a vape shop. And so you do have to get a special use permit, not to go the other way and say all convenience stores, all drugstores, all grocery stores, even if they happen to sell these things. Like, I wouldn't say that Wawa is a vape or a smoke shop just because they sell some of those products. I guess it's like the primary purpose argument, but it just seems like a little bit of an over-regulation for me to think about going from a use that is by right in these areas. Like, we do want these types of stores generally, drugstores, convenience stores. And a lot of times I think the ones that we might want in the city are ones that are smaller, like maybe not a Walgreens, maybe like a local pharmacy or a local convenience store. Hopefully one that its primary purpose is maybe not a vape or a smoke shop. But in that case, they do have to get the special use permit if that's gonna be their primary purpose. So I guess I don't really see this as necessary. So I guess all of that is really more of a comment than a follow-up question.
Well, if I can address, I guess, a couple of those points. The way the ordinance is currently written, it says drugstores, grocery stores, or convenience stores, the primary purpose of which is to sell goods and services other than those listed above, shall not be considered a vape or smoke shop. And so, as Ms. Griffin said, what we have found is that, one, it's I think, difficult for the zoning administrator alone to determine through brief conversations with these store owners and for her to quantify what the primary purpose of their sales are going to be at the time they are applying for a business license. And so one of the benefits of the special use permit is to give more time to explore that, for the city council to set exact limitations on what the primary purpose of that is. And also, I think, if I'm correct, some districts, they are currently by right, some are by special use permit as currently written, convenience stores, retail shops, drugstores. So as much as on the front end, and there's certainly criminal aspects of it, as the chief has stated, there are also issues for the zoning administrator when a business license request comes in and they say, we're going to sell vape products, but it's unclear at the time that she's approving the business license what the primary purpose of the store is going to be. And then on the back end, if we have additional enforcement efforts besides the criminal matters, which can take time and do not really go to the use of the building, more the conduct that is committed inside the building, we then have civil enforcement mechanisms additionally on the back end once the business opens.
Yeah, to that point. In hindsight, it's always nice to have that benefit, can't get any broader than what we already have. Vape shop is a retail establishment that sells cigars, tobacco products, etc. So Wawa, by that definition, is a vape shop. I don't think that's what was intended, but that's how we have it.
Well, as currently written, it has that added language of the primary purpose of which is to sell the above products. It's probably not in the version in front of you.
What I'm looking at, I thought, was the ordinance,
That's the,
1354.
if you're online, I don't think that Muni Code has updated.
That's correct.
Correct. The packet
Packet.
does not have that. That's what the city is hoping the ordinance will look like after these are passed. What it currently says, and I have a copy if you'd like to look at it, is it has the definition of vape shop, and then it says drugstores, grocery stores, or convenience stores, the primary purpose of which is to sell goods and services other than those listed above, shall not be considered vape or smoke shops, even if the above referenced goods are offered for sale. So that is a wide definition to begin with, but then it says even if, as currently written, it says even if you sell those products, if that's not the primary purpose of your business, you're not a vape shop.
Okay. Then I would say that calling this a red line wouldn't be accurate. What's in our packet? Because I'm just reading what's in the packet.
What page are you on in the packet, Mr. Tarley? Do you know what section you're in?
354. I'm not trying to,
That's correct. I think it was uploaded as a red line of what it would look like after passage. It was not, the deletions from the zoning ordinance were not uploaded.
so where are you getting the language on drugstores that primary purpose? I don't see that anywhere in what I have in my packet.
That's from the ordinance that was passed in 2022.
What you see on the screen is actually what was passed in 2022.
Yes. Okay, so drugstores, grocery stores, and convenience stores, primary purpose of which is to sell goods and services other than those listed above. So it's already, to Ms. Bowe's point, it's already there, and you're saying it's too much work for us to determine whether it's a primary purpose.
I don't think we're saying it's too much work. We're saying that, as Ms. Griffin pointed to, a business can come in and say, we are trying to open as a convenience store, but they can label themselves as a convenience store and receive a business license, and then they could operate in a manner where their primary purpose is to sell vape or those types of products. And then instead of being able to control that more on the front end, we would then have to use enforcement actions on the back end to deal with that if they were operating in violation of the zoning ordinance.
Then how does the drugstores and grocery stores fit into that? Are they trying to open up as a drugstore?
Right, in the example that was given, a business came in, said, approached the zoning administrator, said, how can I open a vape shop? And this business was sent the information on vape shops and what was allowed in the city, the zoning ordinance, what was required. And then they returned and said, okay, I'm not a vape shop anymore, I just want to be a convenience store.
Right, I've said drugstore though, or grocery store. I just, once an ordinance is there, it's there forever, right? Unless you amend it. So does it have to be as broad? That is.
So your concern is convenience stores maybe, but does it have to include drugstores and grocery stores?
I'm just asking, I don't know if there's a right or wrong answer. Not knowing what the other jurisdictions do, and we're close proximity to James City County, New York County, where there's right down the street, same thing, so, and I understand the chief's concerns. That's my comment.
I think we're also seeing that drugstores and grocery stores are closing. This particular person that solicited the city said, I'm buying certain types of convenience stores throughout Virginia. That is what I'm doing. So as we see drugstores close, as we see grocery stores close, my concern was, is this something that we're going to get from these vacancies, that people are going to come in and ask for them to be turned over to vape
I
shops
just have to
also?
make myself, I was not even aware that you could buy it at Wawa, so.
If I may, James City County requires a special use permit for a convenience store anywhere in the county.
About a grocery store or drugstore?
That, I believe, is district specific. I know for their ordinance, they have carved out certain uses that they're concerned about countywide, and one of them's a convenience store, another one's automobile and gasoline service stations.
Ms. Griffin, you and I were talking about this yesterday, and you mentioned another application of this proposed ordinance that might be useful, completely separate from a vape or smoke shop. Are you at liberty to talk about that, just to give that example, or not? If not, that's fine.
I'm
That's fine.
not.
But
I'm not.
this special use permit requirement would apply well beyond,
Yes.
right? So somebody coming in saying they want to operate as a convenience store would have to go through this process, and if it's problematic, it gives us the opportunity to say, to put some
Yes.
conditions on it. Okay.
As we, and I tried to allude to that in the staff report, as we see as we see the other places like drugstores and grocery stores begin to turn over, we may, as a city, want to be able to look at what they're offering and to be able to say whether we believe they're compatible with our neighborhood and compatible with our commercial areas.
We've seen more, as you mentioned, more drugstores and grocery stores closing than opening.
That's correct.
That's a nationwide, especially with the drugstores, they're online
Yes.
competition and all that, so that there's more closing there going on. And I know we've had, 7-Eleven.
7-Eleven, and actually this is where 401 Page Street will be this convenience store that we're talking about. The 7-Eleven at Page and
Second Street.
Second Street. Thank you. So that will be that particular use there.
So let me ask you this, I noticed that it mentions gasoline in the request, but it doesn't mention, when you've got the list of drugstores, grocery stores, and convenience stores, it doesn't mention gasoline, with or without, gasoline.
We can make that correction.
I think we need to be consistent. The other thing
That's
is, I
correct.
noticed in one of your slides, there's a comma that's placed differently. So, apologies for that, but we need to make sure that's consistent, that it's, is it drugstores with gas stations, grocery stores with gas stations, and convenience stores with gas stations?
Yes.
Or is it, is that the goal? We need to just make sure the language is consistent.
And the purpose was to edit those that, in districts that already allowed gas, some districts do not allow convenience stores with gasoline. So the idea was to add that language, drugstores, grocery stores, and convenience stores with or without gasoline, based on how it already existed in the district, whether gasoline sales were allowed or not
Okay,
prior
yeah,
to
with,
this.
so with or without is like a third variation on that. So I'm just making the point that we need to.
I'll make
the
sure it's
legal-
correct.
The legal team needs to get out their English degrees and make sure we're consistent with that. Okay, that's the only thing I noticed. Yeah, Mr. Charlie.
Just to trying to play this out as how it would look, okay? So, Wawa comes in and gets a special use permit, let's just say at that 7-Eleven. I know that's probably not on the table. Closes, is that special use permit gone
I think so, yeah.
for somebody else to come in here and?
Yes, that special permit, use permit would just be
So-
for the Wawa.
So somebody wants to come in and open up a convenience store, independent. What would the conditions be? What do we foresee that conditions that we would put on convenience?
There could be any types of conditions. There could be restrictions on hours of operation. There could be,
That address the issues that we're trying to address here.
there could be percentage of sales. You could say how much could be sold there, what percentage of products that could be sold there. You could have signage, something about the signage that could be a special condition. You can have so many parking spaces. There's numerous things that you could
What
have.
I'm saying is that there wouldn't be any ban on what they could sell, other than illegal stuff, but that goes without saying. But they could still sell tobacco products, all those.
There could be percentages that we could place on the amount of sales that you could have, the amount of square footage that that particular product could be in the store.
Wouldn't you already want to do that when, like, a place applying to be a vape or a smoke shop
No, you
applies for the
cannot,
special
there's
use
no
permit?
there's no legal way you can do that. There's
Through the
nothing in our
same
zoning ordinance.
Special use permit process that you're talking about now?
That's the only way that you can do
They're
that.
currently required to get that.
No, yes, they are. They're
Yeah.
currently required to do that.
Right.
Yes.
Right, if their primary purpose
Yeah.
is to sell vape, yes.
So primary purpose means just more than 50%, right? So
It doesn't say that. That's logical, but that's not written anywhere.
That's not
no,
defined.
but you use the plain meaning of the language, and primary means more than not, right? So I'm
In
just
the
asking.
zoning world, that is not something that we can lay our hat on and take to court to be able to uphold.
Well, I'm looking at how we would, kind of following up on Mr. Charlie's point, at what point, how do we decide, what the primary purpose of Wawa is? It's like, 49% vape, 51% Twinkies. I mean, what is it? How do we determine that if there's not a determination, if there's not a standard application or understanding of what primary purpose means?
We do a majority, that is what we look at, but to say it would be 50-50, I can't, for 51, 49, I can't say that. But there's clear a distinction between a Wawa and a vape shop. There's a clear distinction between
Where is that line?
a Wawa or even a Walgreens is a pharmacy with toothpaste. I mean, it's a Wawa. It's a Walgreens. I don't know how to.
Well, bootstrapping there,
But it's clearly, there's a difference between a Wawa, there's a difference between a vape shop. There are people usually not being arrested and drugs and weapons found at a Wawa or Walgreens versus a vape shop.
Well, you mentioned a percentage, though. You mentioned, was it one of the pharmacies, I forget what you're talking about, had 18 square feet or something like that. Do you do that as a percentage of the square footage? I mean, how would you, how would you put the conditions on with a special use permit? How would you do that if these terminology is not defined.
Well, that would be the point of the special use permit, to sit down with the applicant, to go through a planning commission public hearing, to go through a city council public hearing, and to put those parameters on that particular business.
But so
The
what
only
it-
reason
I'm sorry.
why I mentioned the 18%, and this 18 square feet in that particular instance is because the person that came in said, I'm going to be just like a Wawa. And so we said, okay, well, let's go look at the tobacco, the e-liquids, all these things listed and what's at a Wawa. And in measuring that, at a Wawa, it's behind the counter, it's 6 by 3. Clearly, when he said, I want to be a vape shop, he was not just going to put in his store at the former 7-Eleven 18 square feet of this type of products. The entire store would have been these products, not 18 square feet behind the counter.
So the square footage is different from the sales, right? So would you mentioned putting that kind of requirement on. I mean, how would that work? Would you, at the end of every year, they have to turn over all of their sales records, and you have to go through them? I mean, is that, from an enforceability standpoint, is that practical?
That is how it's done if you were doing alcohol sales. Again, I was just giving an example. There are several different ways that you can measure. That's one of the ways that you can measure. I would say we probably would not use that because that would increase our enforcement. From a zoning standpoint, I think percentage and square footage makes more sense.
Mr. Chair, I think
sir.
this exact conversation is the loophole that we're trying to close so that the zoning administrator doesn't have to do this analysis on the front end of what is the primary purpose, and is that 51%, is that 10% of sales if all the other categories of sales you have are less than 10%, and what exactly that language means. And the special use permit is going to help more clearly define what those definitions are and what percentages are allowed.
Okay.
I still feel like it's too vague because what it would be, because we should know, I think, at the front end, it doesn't have to be specific, but generally speaking, what is too much? You know, and if it is primary purpose, you no, I'm gonna sell groceries, and over the period of time, you have a creep of more of these products. You know, there has to be a way to measure what is too much.
What their primary purpose is might be intended, but
Right.
the reality of it may not be that.
Right.
The reality could turn into something, well, I intended to sell a lot of apples this week, but I sold a lot of weed instead.
Yeah, I think the idea is admirable in trying to ensure that you have the businesses who are representing the city and not committing illegalities. Just wondering how we get to that point of figuring out what is too much.
Can we get more information from James City County and York County perhaps as to how they implemented this special use permit and what parameters they have? Because I can see where you say a percentage of the square footage. And if your sales of those products kept increasing, but you couldn't increase the percentage of the square footage of your shop, it would just get more and more crammed into an area that made it very uncomfortable to shop there or browse. But I mean, I was wondering what these other localities have done. Can we get more information like that?
So are you asking in regards to convenience stores?
Convenience stores.
Okay.
The drugstore thing, I think about a small, like mom and pop drugstore, like the Williamsburg drugstore. That is so small that it's very clear where if they were selling vape products, a simple inspection would tell you what was going on. Or you take the prescription shop, which does sell CBD products, but it's a very small percentage of their floor space, if even 3 square feet are taken up by their CBD products. You could tell that fairly simply. But I'm saying in general, if we could find out what the other localities have done to put parameters, what corresponds to your primary use or a secondary use or purpose of the shop.
Okay?
Mr. Phillips, I could tell you have something to say.
My only comment is this. I think that it's incredibly difficult to predict the future of a retail establishment. I think it's incredibly difficult to define primary, secondary, tertiary, et cetera. I think those things are all too hard to do, and they might be micro-regulation, and just too hard. So what I would say is that I'm in favor of this approach to saying you need a special use permit, we want to review it, we want to have a public process that is shouldered broadly to determine what kind of business you'll be. That to me is what I've heard the purpose of this is, and I think it's actually quite sensible, and I don't think it'll represent a burden on businesses that want to do business in Williamsburg. So.
Yeah, I'm sorry. So I'm trying to get there. I know landlords who have said, nope, I'm not renting to a vapor smoke shop on principle, and I understand what we're trying to do here. I'm just trying to get there. If there was a measurement, or if the definition stopped after e-liquids and then said any store that sells these products cannot exceed more than X percentage of square footage, and it had to be behind a glass counter or something, then that is a measurable, specific thing. I think things do creep over time, and purposes and intent are very vague. I think this would probably prohibit a tobacco store that just sells cigars from coming into our community without a special use permit. I'm not saying that's good or bad, but I'm not sure that lumping them all into the same is good. I think we've got stores, perhaps such as Mary Organics, which is a store I've never walked into, but they may consider themselves a drugstore. And so I struggle with the substances that are really restricted, not being choked down to a specific measurable point in a store, such as the Wawa, where, oh, you want this, this is how many square feet you've got in the store, it's behind a counter, you got to ask for it, something like that. So I'm just trying to get there, because I understand the loophole, and yeah.
But you're talking about we would put the percentages into the ordinance, or no? Because isn't that the purpose of the special use permit application?
Yes.
You would study all of that before.
Before approving.
Yes, yeah.
For approving. So the example that was given, even if it was a convenience store, we would have to do a thorough investigation to ask, okay, what are you going to be selling? What is it going to look like? All of those questions would be asked during a public process, sitting down in the office, and Planning Commission and City Council. As Mr. Lambert said, at this point, when someone comes in and says, I'm a convenience store, but they're really a vape shop, there's nothing we can do about it. And on the back end, we would be, my zoning and the police would then be taking care of it on the back end, instead of having a public process to take care of it during that time. And 9 times out of 10, if there is going to be someone that's going to come in as a vape or smoke shop, as the chief said, they may or may not want to go through the special use permit process, so they wouldn't continue to ask us questions about it.
Just to address 2 of the comments, as currently written, a tobacco shop would have to get a special use permit, and we did discuss in drafting this something like the prescription shop, and that we felt that would be a pharmacy and not a drugstore that is not would not be wrapped up in this particular amendment. Pharmacies are a separate definition and word used in the zoning ordinance.
What's a drugstore then? I thought a drugstore was a pharmacy this whole time. So like, what would
I'm
be a
like you.
drugstore?
I'm like you, oh, well, if that's the case,
That's
who's
what I
gonna
thought,
open a
like,
drugstore?
isn't that
What a silly
the
thing to
term
present.
for it?
Pharmacy.
I
That's
think
what my
a
parents always
place
called it.
like Walgreens would be a drugstore that also has a pharmacy within it.
So like a Rite Aid or CVS would actually not be a pharmacy. It would be a drugstore.
Correct.
Yes. I-
Because they sell OTC drugs.
But so does the prescription shop.
It's true.
The Rite Aid,
And CBD,
Walgreens
apparently.
farm sell food products, beauty products,
So do
things
the
like
vape
that.
shops.
So
I think it's also important to add that this takes place again in not downtown, because right now vape shops are not allowed anywhere in downtown. This is LB2, LB3, LB4, B1, B2, B3, B4. I might have added some in there, but this is Capitol Landing Road, Page Street, 2nd Street, York Street, Penniman Road area, Richmond Road, Monticello. It does not include High Street, does not include Quarter Path.
I can look at these and figure out like what is what, and I know that you're probably really well versed with what colors are what districts, but I didn't see a legend on here, and that would have been really helpful when looking at the maps.
Okay,
Like
thank
what
you.
color is which district?
Yes. And I will make sure I do that next time.
Thanks.
In the staff report, it did show that the red and orange colors are business areas. And so everywhere in any of the maps where there's red or pink or orange, those are the business districts. The brown is High Street, so I did not mention those because it would not pertain to that. And then as far as the green area here is Quarter Path, and it would not pertain to that. So it's the red, green, and orange areas as noted in the staff report. So the master plan communities now that have the Harris Teeter, they would not, if that changes, they would not have to come back before us just to change out the Harris Teeter to another grocery store that is not coming back before you for a special use permit. It's the smaller square footage areas that would have to come for a special use permit for groceries, stores.
So a store, if the ordinance said any store that sells these products is restricted to 1% of their square footage, then that doesn't solve the problem as opposed to going to their primary purpose. Am I correct?
Can you reword that? Because I'm not sure I understood.
If, instead of using the term such as primary purpose or primary intent, it said any store that does sell these products is restricted to not more than 1% of their square footage without obtaining a special use permit.
I think more what we were trying to do was speak to convenience stores. So I think that percentage that you're asking about should be with the convenience store definition and not with the vape shop definition. So I think what you're saying, convenience stores do not sell more than such and such of this product. Is that what you're saying? Because otherwise, I don't think that would work with the vape shop definition. Because you have to have a definition for vape shops, or it's no longer a vape shop. I think what we're trying to get to is to let people know that you can't come in as a convenience store but really be a vape shop.
And I'm with you on that, and I do not mean to wordsmith what y'all have worked on for weeks and months, I'm sure. But the definition stays as is written on the screen. But then instead of saying drugstores, grocery stores, and convenience stores, if it said any store such as drugstores, grocery stores cannot have more than 1% of floor space dedicated to these items, or they must apply for a special use permit. I'm trying to make it so that the Wawas can come in without having to go through the special use permit. I'm trying to make it so that
Okay.
we're dealing with this specific item that's got a tangible number based on either square footage or sales volume. I think the square footage is more in line with a zoning ordinance, because that's very easily measured and doesn't have to be measured every month or every year. So a square footage formula makes sense to me, and that if we just decide that any store that has more than, I'm saying 1%, but X%, is dedicated to these products must then apply for a special use permit. Whether it's a grocery store, a convenience store, a department store, whatever they want to call it. If they got this many square feet in their store and this percentage of it is selling any of those items, that seems like a very measurable, static thing to me.
Okay. I think I understand him. I think between Jake and Thomas, we can, and Heather, we can sit down and talk about that. I totally understand, and we can come back with some different language to see if that helps.
Yeah, what I was gonna suggest is that we move to table this. There've been some really important things brought up and some requests for some additional information. I agree this is, per the chief's comment, I totally get that this is important, but we need to get it right. Mr. Tarley's, coming up with some scenarios, and we're not quite sure how they're gonna play out, and I think we all need to have some time to think about that and maybe get some more information and maybe clean up the language, make sure our packet, accurate, that we were all looking at accurately reflects, the ordinances that we're talking about.
I would ask, tabling usually gets us to the next meeting. I would ask that the motion would be until we feel like we have it where you want it to be, and that may not be next month.
Okay, so it's the city's request, so you're the city. What are you,
Should we have,
do we need to vote on it, or what do we need to do? If we're not gonna,
we haven't had to close the open floor.
we haven't yet, and that's what I was gonna ask. Do we need an open forum if we're,
Yes, you do.
if you're gonna withdraw it?
Yes, you still
or-
need to open the public
Okay, I'll
hearing.
go ahead and open the forum and ask if anybody would like to come and address us about this particular proposal. Seeing a shake of the head, I'll go ahead and close the open forum. Okay, City of Williamsburg, as the applicant, are you asking us to withhold, just to refrain from voting on this today then, and to come back with more information?
I'm not asking if that's what you would like to do.
Well,
That's fine.
I'm just saying, we either need to table it, I'm asking for guidance on what we need to do. My thought would be to table it, but if you're not going to be ready for next month, then what do we do in the alternative, as opposed to tabling it?
Is withdrawing it an option?
No, I think you can table it and just say, come back in 2 months. You can put a time frame on it
I can
instead
put
of
time
saying
frame
1
on it.
month.
Well, that's easy. Okay,
Yes.
is there a motion to table PCR 25-008 until such time as the applicant, the City of Williamsburg, chooses to bring it back before the Planning Commission?
Moved.
Second.
Ms. Griffin, is that good?
Well, I was having a conversation with the legal team, and
I understand.
I'm sorry?
I think I understand the situation.
Right. It's up to the planning commission at this point. I think it's the city's application. The city is happy with the way it reads currently, so it's up to the planning commission to determine.
We'll ask for some
What you
additional
would like.
information.
Correct. So I think,
So you're saying you're not going to get us the information that we've asked
no.
for?
I'm just saying that,
I'm trying to figure out what we're saying, Mr. Lambert. Do you want us to vote on this? Because we've made a vote, and I'm waiting for the roll call on the vote.
okay,
at
and
this
that's to
point.
table for 2 months?
No, to
Was that-
table until the city's ready to bring it back to us, giving
Okay.
you plenty of time to do it.
I
If
think
it's-
I
if
would
it's
just ask that it be continued or tabled until the next meeting.
not- Well, Ms. Griffin just said something different.
I will defer to the city attorney's office.
Okay, there's a motion that has been made and seconded. Ms. Griffin, would you call the vote, please?
Yes, sir. Mrs. Bowe?
Aye.
Mr. Tarley?
Aye.
Mr. Boswell?
Aye.
Mr. Granger?
Aye.
Mrs. Liebel?
Aye.
Mr. Phillips?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. We don't have any unfinished business, new business, or informational items. We have some public hearings that are scheduled for June 18, 2025. Anything else that we need to talk about today? Okay, this meeting is adjourned. Thanks, everyone.